Dr. Olufunmilayo Olopade was told to not live on the south side of Chicago when she got there. She's originally from Nigeria and moved to the US to pursue a career in medicine. And she eventually ended up as a hematology oncology fellow at the University of Chicago. But she eventually got tired of commuting from the suburbs, and she decided to just blow past that piece of advice and move to Hyde Park, which is the neighborhood surrounding UChicago on the south side. And it was after that when a light bulb moment went off. She grew up on the other side of the world, but nonetheless, her neighbors looked like her. And it was this observation that became the backbone of Dr. Olopade's research into genetic risk factors that contribute to racial disparities in cancer outcomes. Olopade is the founding director of the Center for Clinical Cancer Genetics and Global Health at the University of Chicago, and she is our guest in this month's episode of the Cancer History Project podcast honoring Black History Month. Olopade speaks with Dr. Robert Winn, who is the director of the Massey Comprehensive Cancer Center at Virginia Commonwealth University.
We want to welcome Dr. Olopade. Many of you know that this is a month in which we have reflections on all of those people who've contributed immensely to the impact of advancing our field in cancer. And I couldn't want anybody better than to have Dr. Olopade with me. In fact, I'm honored. In fact, I'm a little bit like more than excited that you're on. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Olopade is not only the director of the Center for Clinical Cancer Genetics and Global Health at the University of Chicago, but let's get real. What she is really a giant in the field and internationally renowned in the context of her expertise in breast cancer. And we're going to get to that in this conversation. And by the way, for those of you who thought you knew Dr. Olopade, remember that she is a really rare, not only National Academy, but in that top 1% of the 2025 MacArthur Fellowship, also known as your Genius Grant. Just those who wanted to just think about this. So, Dr. Olopade, I'm so happy to be with you today. And in fact, this is going to be just one of these things of just trying to get to know you a little bit better, because I believe that your career, the arc of your career, the mission of your career, the commitment to this career actually can inspire many others. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. And, I know you had that beautiful introduction, but I still can't forgive you for leaving me in Chicago to go to warmer weather. I'm in my office and I'm overlooking the skyline in Chicago, and it's freezing. Everybody's complaining, and I'm happy because Chicago has been a happy place for me.
I do. That's right. Well, let's jump right into it. So the question always starts with, how did you get to picking a career in medicine and in science? Well, I mean, how did that happen?
Well, for us to honor Black History Month, we have to honor all the people who mentored us, who were ahead of us. And so for me, my father was a pastor and my parents really wanted a doctor. I had big, brothers and sisters, and I was number 5 of 6 children. And there was just one last chance to find a doctor in the family. Because in those days, growing up in Nigeria, you were either a teacher, a pastor, or, and then, in his generation, he became a pastor. And then the next generation, he wanted, scientists and economists and doctors. So, I had people ahead of me who were in science and engineering. So, but I really, listened to my dad, and then my mother supported me to stay in medicine and not drop out. So that's really how I, came to medicine. Because as you know, our community really prays a lot. Our community wants good outcomes. And when you have nothing, the only thing you have is God. And in my culture, in Yoruba culture, we believe in a lot of natural phenomena. But my father was exposed to science early because, the missionaries took him to school at a very old age. But then, if he would pray and then bad things still happened, he said, maybe I should hedge my bet on science. So all of us became scientists. And I've been fortunate to I came to Chicago in a cold, wintry weather, landed at Cook County Hospital, and I saw a lot of Black folks.
That's right.
And those Black folks were just like the people I left behind in Nigeria.
Right.
And that's why I was like, genetics is strong no matter where you go.
That's right.
So,
Yes. So getting to that point, what I love about what you just said is that, and again, Dr. Olopade, we do this thing that we actually sort of say, there's no war with science and religion unless it's either bad science or bad religion, because they are working together. This issue of genetics, you were just going to touch on it. Right. You could have done so many other fields, but at the time that you chose genetics, how did that happen? Because I was thinking back to your career, thinking that you could have gone in multiple different directions, and yet you landed on genetics at a time where it wasn't so popular, by the way.
yeah, well, so the good thing about science is that scientists are always asking questions.
Mm,
So coming to America, what I thought I
mm.
was going to do was to do cardiology, because all I saw when I was in medical school were children with rheumatic heart disease. They had damaged their heart from not getting access to penicillin. Okay. And then I got to county and we were having people who had heart attacks. We were saving people in the critical care unit, and then we're asking people to change their lifestyle. And I thought, oh, well, that seems solved because we knew the risk factors for heart disease. And then I remembered that, in fact, I saw patients with Burkitt's lymphoma when I was in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And as an intern, we would get that red medicine that everybody calls red devil in America. And these tumors will melt away. And I knew some tumors melted away. And even at Cook County Hospital, when we gave patients chemotherapy, many of them wanted more. But unfortunately, some of them came and it was already advanced. So that was why when I was reading my textbook of medicine, which is what I love doing, is, reading textbooks cover to cover, I came across Janet Rowley and this amazing, description of chromosomes and leukemia and lymphoma. And then I kept, putting two and two together. And, I was fortunate to have been, just a 1 year rotation at the old Michael Reese Hospital.
Oh my
And,
God.
some of the
Yes.
University of Chicago, faculty and residents were there. And I went there from county and I said, oh, these people don't have two heads. I can go to University of Chicago and study genetics. That's what happened.
You know what? So you remind me, you were around that era where Michael Reese, for those who don't know, was historic. I'm talking about some of the luminaries. Can you mention some of the luminaries or big giants that had an impact on you in the context of, again, oncology or science?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Dr. Jordan was the chairman of medicine.
It's amazing. Uh,
Amazing, right? And
Amazing.
there are so many wonderful people who practice the highest level of, science, medicine, and our pharmacogenomics team, Mark Rattain, all those Everett Volks, they were all at Michael Reese. And Harvey Gollum took me into the fellowship
Oh
program.
God, that's
And
right.
right. And so, let's just say the stars were aligned. I didn't know what I was doing, but I kept putting one foot in front of the other. And from the minute I met Harvey Gollum, who interviewed me for fellowship, and really became a great mentor and asked me to go work in Janet's lab. I was set because between, Harvey Gollum and Janet Rowley, I couldn't but just love genetics.
listen, listen, absolutely. I was thinking around that time, and we, again, talking about Nigeria, but also talking about Chicago, particularly the south side of Chicago, which, you talked about Cook County, you talked about these other things. But one of the things that I actually have always been sort of actually just really not impressed, just connected with you around was this issue of you could do science, but the science impacting the community, whether it's in Nigeria or whether it's on the south side of Chicago. Where did that come from? Because sometimes people love science a lot, but it doesn't always mean that that science translates to impacting communities. How'd you put those two pieces together?
Well, so, there are certain things that happen to women in science, and that
Mm,
is sometimes they get pregnant and then they have children. And so,
that little thing.
so, I was having a hard time during fellowship because everyone says when you have children, go to the suburbs. So here was I trying to come back from the suburb in Southwest Chicago to come to my fellowship at the University of Chicago, going through that traffic.
Mhm.
And, by the third month of my fellowship, I went to my boss, Harvey Gollum. I said, this is hard. I have to drop my children in at daycare very early, commute in, and I was failing at being a hematology oncology fellow. And Harvey Gollum said, oh, have you thought about living in Hyde Park? And I said, Hyde Park. But they told me don't live on the south side. And that was the game changer because, Chicago
Wow.
is so racially segregated and you're new in the city and they tell you where to live. And the minute I discovered Hyde Park and the University of Chicago and my neighbors, of course, that's why I do work that impacts the community because these are my neighbors. And so, the brilliance of working at a place like University of Chicago that is small and we're all on the same campus and we have global ambition is that, people tell you your neighbor might win the Nobel Prize. And, my mentor was waiting to win the Nobel Prize. Everybody just loves doing science. So I had no choice but to be,
Mm.
in that environment. And I want to say something about genetics because we talk about it now. And I think if you take genetics in isolation, you will realize that none of that is going to impact society,
Right?
right? So
Right?
Dr. Ali always said risk adapted treatment for leukemia. And then I wanted to not compete with my mentor. So I went to look at risk adapted treatment for breast cancer. And that's when we started talking about triple negative breast cancer. Because if you just look at all the women who were walking into my door, why is it that these Black women were coming in with young onset triple negative breast cancer? And no one was studying it. In fact, Dr. Bowman, who, God bless his heart, tried to start a sickle cell program at the University of Chicago after
Yes, he did.
he
Talk about
did.
another historic figure.
Absolutely. And these are all my neighbors, right? So when you have such greatness, when you have Michelle Obama and Barack Obama as your neighbors who are thinking about great things, you cannot but think about the community, and that community influences you. When you are in medicals, and when you look at Otis Brawley, who also was a U of C alum, all these people are people that you take for granted, but they are all my homies.
Do you know, I have totally forgotten those two talk about people who have made also impact. So you were walking around people who were just, not only were you influenced by the community, but you're bringing in the context that you just actually were blessed with having talent, all kinds of talent from the basic to the clinical to the translational to the community outreach and engage around you.
Absolutely. And, former First Lady Michelle Obama's credit, whenever I had anything to do, I would say, could you help us get your husband to come and do, survivorship? And I have a photograph of them in my office on a Sunday. I shall drag her husband and he'll come because these are good neighbors. Valerie Jarrett, good neighbors, all
Great
of
name.
them wanting to make the south side of Chicago the place to come to. And of course, the University of Chicago pushing us to do the best science. So I've just been blessed. And that's why when people ask me, why are you still in cold Chicago? I'm like, where else can I go?
You better stop. So one important question. You also are in Chicago, but you also have paid attention to what's happening internationally with global. How and why did you maintain that sort of balance of what was on the south side of Chicago and greater Chicago and what the work that you're doing outside of the United States? What was the framework for that?
Well, so, when you do genetics, you're going to understand that the genetic basis of every cancer or everything we do starts in Africa, right? So for us as clinicians and for the fundamental thing we were doing, it was the phenotype. We saw breast cancer cases and then we saw gene expression that wasn't quite right, right? But the question is, if we begin to say, how did it start? Then you have to begin to appreciate the diversity that makes Chicago a great city, right? Because
Mhm.
every single patient who came through my clinic was unique and different. They brought many things to that appointment. So that's why when you write a grant and you have an idea to study a particular disease, you have to then ask, okay, how can you get to the root? So what I was trying to do by going to Nigeria, and I can tell you, when my husband, who happens to be a pulmonologist like you, that's why I've been tracking your career. We wanted to go and study. He was so interested in studying asthma, and I was coming with,
Yes,
breast cancer. And we had the idea that why is it that Black children have the highest mortality rate in Chicago? Black women have the highest mortality rate in Chicago. I mean, why? And I will come across people who absolutely said it was the system was rigged against them. And I
mm,
couldn't stay in my ivory tower and say, no, it wasn't rigged against them because I knew the challenges that my patients faced when they came to the same doctor, right? And you have different outcomes, right? Because I would say, all the wealthy white women came to me because we had the best science in those
yes,
days, right? Dennis
yes,
Lehman, who was also a U of C alum, brought clinical trials to us at the University of Chicago. I met Laura. I mean, so everybody was really, Laura Esserman, who happens to be one of my best friends in science, was born at Ingalls Hospital because there were a lot of people who made Chicago home before they left for LA, before they left to
that's true.
other places. So whenever we wanted to actually talk about real genetics and science, everywhere I went, I met people who said, oh, yeah, my parents grew up in Chicago. I'm now in LA. So we did stand up to cancer. Everybody came. They wanted to launch it at the old Comiskey Park to raise money. And AACR was a wonderful community that I found
Yes.
myself in. So everybody was really excited about their science and they brought me along. So to cut a long story short, women wanted to have a march. We had a march on Washington. We had a national breast cancer action plan. And I said, I have an idea. Could I study breast cancer in Nigeria and compare those women to the women that are in my, because every time I see a
Oh,
Black woman, I was like, she's my long lost cousin.
uh-huh.
right?
Yes.
I go to Brazil and I was like, this person looks like my long lost cousin. So
Yes.
we may have been divided by the slave trade and the waters, but the culture, right? The culture
Yes.
of being happy, thinking about your spiritual beings, thinking about your ancestors has stayed with us. And so
Yes.
my Yoruba culture really worships our ancestors and the people
Yes.
before us. And so that's why I was able to really say, okay, let's lay the foundation for genetics. Let's go to Nigeria. When my husband also went, he was like, okay, let's see what we can do about the environment, because he was interested in the environment. And it turns out that the environment was so dramatically different. The genetics may be the same, but the environment acts on your genes. And that's why we can reconcile both issues, right? I'm not going to move the women on the South Side out of the South Side, but I'm going to take trials to them. I'm not going to move everybody out of Nigeria, but I'm going to take research to them and I'm going to do clinical trials there. So I kept telling people, you can't all run out of Africa. We can't forget that there's so many billions of people on the planet who need our care. So that's why I became really passionate. And I'm so happy that they have a named global research after you, Robert Winn, because you can bring the money. I just talk about it.
You bring up one really, really good point, though, that sometimes when people are thinking about this type of research, what I love what you just did is you set out that there is rigor around the science, that it is absolutely steeped in the scientific methodology, and that by understanding things like what's going on with groups that are, descendants in the context of Brazil or Nigeria. Oh, by the way, you wouldn't know this, but at least my what do you say, genetic test says that I'm 37% Nigerian. But we get back to that later, somewhere else, but
Oh,
but
from the
you know.
first day I saw you, I knew you were. So don't worry about that.
But the point you talked about using learning the scientific methodology and then applying the scientific methodology for outcome. Can you actually talk a little bit more about how that is a framework? It's not just things that you're doing, but you're seeing it through rigor frameworks of through steeped in methodology of research and science. How do you counsel young people about the power of using that methodology? Because you
Yeah.
can feel, but how do you use the tool of science to make
Yeah.
impact?
Yeah. So, throughout my career, what I heard was that, uh, it's too expensive for you to be in science because
Yes,
you can practice medicine and make a lot of money,
yes,
right? But the intellectual curiosity is the most important thing you need to be a scientist, right? And if you are really asking questions, why? Right? And so to me, I know that it's very hard to come from a place where you have nothing, where you are poor, and then expect to dedicate your life to science. And one of the things that my mentor, and I
mm,
would say this to Dr. Gollum, was that he often would say, well, you may not become rich, but you're going to be famous. And I never expected to be either rich or famous. I just wanted to be able to ask questions once I got the bug, right?
got it.
And the thing is that, even when you are in medical school, right, there's a pedagogy that we learned in our medical school in Nigeria, which was, as a doctor, you are in the ivory tower, you are always asking your questions and learning from your questions. So that clinical foundation was there. But then I didn't know the science that was driving that. And that was why it was really important for me to be able to just lock myself in the lab and make the commitment that I was going to work in the lab. So for 4 years of postdoctoral work at the University of Chicago, living in the community, coming back, I could go home and have dinner and then just come back to the lab. It provided the best integration for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but research is research. And this is one of the things that I really want to make sure everybody understands.
Yes.
The time I got my first
Yes.
R01, the time I got my first American Cancer Society award, my mentor taught me how to write a grant. And once you get that first grant, it's like sugar rush, right? It's like, oh my God, I got that. Let me write another one. And let me write another one. And then you learn how to write grants.
Yes.
It's not for everybody. And that's why, I've stayed in the lab. People do epidemiology. You were a fantastic pulmonologist. You did, research. So research is research. But if it is with the intention of saving lives, and that's why I think for MDs, it's a lot easier for us. For me, when cancer has no cure, how can I say I got this? So that's the motivating factor. And it gets me up every day because we have to find cause. When young women are dying of breast cancer, I have to ask the question, why? And then when people started talking about young Black women, I was like, this is personal.
This is personal. You know what? Every time I get to sit on a panel with you, or every time I get to do anything with you, I always leave better off. I'm just letting you know that. So I just always, I'm much more aware, and I think also much more even motivated about the work that you and others have been doing and why it actually matters. To that end, I have a question for you. If you were in today sitting across the table with young people, what you do, what advice would you give them today in the context of wanting to go down the path of being a physician scientist, or just a scientist or a physician? What general advice would you have for them?
Well, today is a different story because it's even harder to be a physician scientist and you have fewer role models.
Yes.
Right? A lot of people who were physician scientists, the story was that they were dodging the Vietnam War. So they went to fight the war at the NIH.
Yes.
Now, today, all of that infrastructure to get people excited about science is being reorganized. And
Yes.
so it would be very challenging to say, I'm going to take that on because guess what? It's too hard.
Yep.
And what I tell them is that nothing in life comes easy.
True.
We are privileged to
True.
be scientists.
True.
So what I just tell them is that it doesn't matter what you do. If you set your heart in it, it's hard work, right?
Yes.
And so you just need to be honest with yourself, true to yourself, and do the hard work. Go to school. So when my children were coming out, none of them, by the way, went to medicine. And it's okay. You get to do whatever you want. But what I want you to do is show up, go to school. Because if you just go to school and listen to what's going on in class, you will be inspired. There will be one teacher that's going to inspire you. And that teacher, make them your mentor, because that's really what it's about. It's not everybody wants you to get everything from home. No, some people are lucky to have a home where they're going to be able to have all the privilege, and some people are not. And that's why for me, our generation, we have to continue showing up.
Yes.
Because if they don't see people who have gone through a lot of hardship and stayed with it, they're going to say, oh, this is too hard.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Right?
And in fact, sometimes we talk about the hard part, but at the end of the day, when get the opportunities and things to talk to you, we always also talk about what makes us happy, what brings us joy, from the science as well. So I think sometimes these young people understand the struggle without understanding that within the struggle, there is joy, there is happiness, there is excitement.
Absolutely. And I think it's just that we are not telling the story of the joy that comes from it, right? Right. And so I'll tell you a story because that story is what really, when I'm in clinic, I tell everybody, when I was at county, I didn't used to go to clinic in my Sunday best. And I remember one of my patients saying, "Doctor, why aren't you wearing stockings?" And I was like, "Oh, she expects me to be in my Sunday dress." Because she respects herself and she expects the doctor to respect her. Guess what? From that moment on, I don't go to clinic without looking my best
Yes.
because patients see you. So when I'm telling people, look, make sure you respect your patient, you treat them with dignity, treat yourself with dignity, whatever that means to you. And all those good vibes are the
Yes.
things that motivate you. And don't be angry, just be patient. Because I can't tell you that we don't have racism in Chicago. We have a lot of it. But you know what? I'm standing up for my community.
Yes.
And this moment is a time for us to stand for with our communities. And the young people need to just really know that this time too shall pass. When I was coming up, they said you had to write 10 grants to get one. And I was like, fine, I'll write 10 grants. If I get one, that would be great. But sometimes you get one before you even have written your second grant. So
It's true.
just ground yourself in knowing that others have done it. And in honor of Black History Month, I just have to say there are just so many brilliant people in the world. And surround yourself with brilliant people. And it
Surround
doesn't
your,
matter
come
whether
on.
they're black, white, or brown, just surround yourself with good
You
people.
you just said something that is, I mean, an absolute truth. Surround yourself with good people, and if they're good and they're brilliant, we're the better off for it. So, with
Yeah.
my last two questions, I have because we're ending up this session. I have two questions, and I'll start off with the first one. What brings? Who are some of the historic figures that if you think about as we think about the Charles Drews or the historic figures in either in Africa or in, Brazil or in America, who are the historic figures of science, African Americans or what have you, that have actually had an influence on you? We talked about Dr. James Bowman Jr., who was amazing, but have there been others? If you think about it back, like who have you sort of said had an influence on you, or somebody that you just admire?
Yeah. So one of the first places I came to in America was Harlem Hospital.
My God,
Right,
yes.
right? And
Yes.
and you know that at Harlem Hospital we had great surgeons who founded Ralph Lauren Center.
Mhm.
Okay. And whenever I went to talk about genetics, you know, those guys always said, think about the social determinants. And then they planted themselves and they would challenge me that it's not about the genetics. It's about the fact that people can't even get their breast cancers diagnosed. So there's so many Black giants in oncology that I don't want to name specific names. But
Absolutely.
let me tell you, the
Absolutely.
one person that I think sometimes we forget, it's Lucio Luzzatto. Lucio Luzzatto is an Italian who in 1960 went to Nigeria, okay, and he spent 10 years in my medical school.
What?
Okay, yes. And he discovered G6PD deficiency.
Uh, no way. Oh
Yes.
my God, that's right. Yes.
Okay. And he adopted children from Nigeria and he ended up becoming the head of genetics at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Okay. And the reason why I'm giving this example is that you have to be in a place to be able to influence people. You understand?
Yes.
So if you are in a place,
yes,
you will be able to influence the next generation. And it doesn't matter. So I didn't grow up in America, okay? But I grew up in Nigeria. And you know my name, Olufunmilayo, is Olufunmilayo Ransom Kuti. Fela.
Fela Ransom Kunti.
There's no one who doesn't know Fela. Fela finally got his Lifetime Achievement Award at the last Grammy.
Yes.
Right? Because Fela's mother was the first woman to go buy a car in China, come back to Nigeria, and she was a political figure. All of two of her children were doctors, except Fela said, you know what? I'm not going to buy that because that's Western. His father sent him to go and learn Western music, but he then started Afro-pop music. And you can see how that has been influential
around the world.
Around the world. So we have a global movement where brilliance can come, people can inspire you through arts, right? And we have arts in medicine. So when I'm talking about medicine now, I actually think we should talk about STEAM, right? It's not just STEM, it's arts. And Chicago has beautiful arts. People need to be able to have the other side of their brain work. Right. So Funmi Ransom Kuti, when people call me Funmi, I was like, we lived on the same compound with this woman. She was people call her feminist now, but she was just a brilliant woman.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Yes. So my last question for you, this may be the hardest of all the questions. It's probably going to be the hardest of all the questions. What gives you hope in the context of science, of either where it's going or what it could be? What brings you hope today?
Oh, look at how many people are in science now that were not even allowed to be part of a scientific community, right? Look at how many, when I talk about people getting a great education and influencing their community, whether it's, the person who gave me the most joy when I first came to Chicago was Michael Jordan, right?
I know that's
because
right.
Remember, he was on the west side.
He was on the west side.
And as soon as he was coming to county, we knew this is what we needed to do, right? We go study, and then we watch Michael Jordan. And then at the end of the year, we're winning. Chicago was winning. And then, whether it's the bear, what I'm saying is the community can influence you. And I'm hopeful, and I know that not only NIH supports our research, foundations support research. We have now people from our communities that are wealthy. They're telling the stories, right? How many MacArthur geniuses have come up since I was doing my work and they gave me a MacArthur Genius Award? And all these geniuses are in every community. We just need to make sure that they can see role models in their own communities. That's why I'm so grateful for the work you're doing to get funds, to get clinical trials, to get people to stay in place and have funding to do the work that they need to do. What gives me hope is the next generation.
I love this.
So I was looking to apply for a SPOR grant, after climbing Kilimanjaro. And my daughter, who had just really finished her MBA, said, why are you always writing grants? Why don't you start a company? I'm going to go to Booth to help you find people at Booth. Maybe they can help bring your idea to market. And we wrote this when she was saying, this is a way to have other ways of funding your ideas. And I haven't erased this whiteboard because you need to have ideas, and ideas can come from young people. So that's what gives me hope. I hang out with my children, I hang out with young people, and they come up with the most brilliant ideas. So if I'm going to give, one last thing is that we need to have multi-generational interactions
Oh, I love that.
where we are impacting wisdom, but we're learning from these young people, because these young people really have great ideas. And if we're open-minded about it, great things will happen. So Cancer IQ is a company that is now been in the population health management for 10 years. It started as an idea that's still on my whiteboard.
You know what? Listen, that was brilliant. And what a way to end. And again, thank you for taking, I know you're really busy, so thank you for taking the time out of your ridiculously busy schedule to spend with me. I'm grateful. Appreciate you.
Thank you to the Cancer History Project sponsors, City of Hope, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, Sidney Kimmel Comprehensive Cancer Center at Johns Hopkins, and the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center.